Hey everyone, mariuszgajdzik here, and in this video I'm gonna compare all the Sony compact cameras from ZV line, which is gonna be the ZV-1F, ZV-1 and ZV-1 Mark II. So all the compact cameras that I mentioned before, and all the cameras are pretty similar, so I'm gonna start with the similarities. All these cameras has a same sensor, which is 20 megapixel sensor. All of them has a same screen, which is the flip out screen and touch screen. All of them are using SD cards. All of them are using the same battery. All of them shoot 4K up to 30 frames per second and HD up to 120 frames per second. All of them record in 8-bit and you can use S-Log or Cine Profile files. Also, all of them has micro HDMI mic input, but none of them has headphone out. All of them has defocus and product presentation modes. All of them has USB streaming with HD quality. And lastly, all of them has active stabilization, and that's pretty much all the similarities. And now we're gonna be talking about differences between them all. And the biggest difference here is definitely gonna be the lens, and the ZV-1F has a 20mm lens, which is f2. So you're gonna be having quite a wide angle lens over here, so pretty good for vlogging. Holding the camera in your hand and vlogging this way, it's gonna be wide enough even with the active stabilization, so you shouldn't be worried about that over here at all. The ZV-1 has the 24 to 70mm lens, which is f1.8 to f2.8, so it's not gonna be so wide on the widest end, so this might be something to be worried about over here, because you want the widest lens you can have for vlogging if you hold in the camera in your hand. However, you're gonna get more reach with this lens, so you're gonna have 70mm here, so you can zoom in the most when it comes to those three cameras. And the ZV-1 Mark II has a 18 to 50mm lens, which is f1.8 to f4. So on the 50mm is f4, whereas the 70mm of ZV-1 is f2.8. So that's gonna be better for low light or background blur and that kind of things. So you need to choose between those two very carefully. It depends what you want. If you want more reach and more background blur but not as wide, or if you want to have a wide angle lens but not as much reach and less of the background blur and worse low light in ZV-1 Mark II because of the f4 on the 50mm lens. So very good for vlogging, 80mm, and not so good for reach when it comes to the ZV-1 Mark II. So that's the main differences when it comes to lenses. The second biggest difference is gonna be the price, which the ZV-1F is gonna be the cheapest one, the ZV-1 Mark I is gonna be the middle one, and ZV-1 Mark II is gonna be the most expensive one. They actually increased the price, so you need to basically decide on top of those two things. The lens and the price of the camera is going to be the major factor when you deciding between those cameras. When it comes to the autofocus, they all have very good autofocus, but I need to mention over here that the ZV-1F is only contrast detect, whereas the ZV-1 and ZV-1 Mark II is contrast and phase detection autofocus, so this should be better. But when I was using all those cameras, I didn't see major difference. And the ZV-1 Mark II, if you're recording animals, might be better for you because you be able to use the animal detection autofocus in the ZV-1 Mark II in video mode, whereas in the ZV-1 and ZV-1F you're gonna only be able to use that in photo mode. ZV-1 also has the micro USB, whereas the ZV-1F and ZV-1 Mark II has a USB-C, which is the standard nowadays. Even the iPhone is changing to that, so we should all be using USB-C right now. However, the ZV-1 has the HFR mode, which is enabling us to record up to 1000 frames per second, and the ZV-1 Mark II and ZV-1F doesn't have that, so I'm not sure why they don't have that. Probably they should rather improve the quality of that HFR rather than delete it from the newer cameras. So I'm pretty sad that mode is gone, because it was a lot of fun playing with it when I was testing out the camera. So I wish the ZV-1F and ZV-1 Mark II also had it. When it comes to the size of the cameras, it's pretty much similar. The ZV-1F is gonna be the smallest one and the lightest one, just because of the smaller fixed lens, whereas the ZV-1 and ZV-1 Mark II are gonna be pretty similar. They also use the same cages, etc. But when it comes to weight, the ZV-1F is 256 grams, the ZV-1 is 290 grams, and the ZV-1 II is 292 grams. So here, for me, not much of a difference. Those cameras are super light anyway, so the 50 grams probably not gonna make a huge difference. Where we can find a bigger difference is the new menus on the ZV-1F and ZV-1 Mark II. We get the new menus, the menus we know from FX3, the ZV-E1, the A7S III, I believe, the A7 IV, etc. I prefer those menus, but this is not a huge deal again. The bigger deal might be the menus on the touchscreen. So you can use the touchscreen on ZV-1F and ZV-1 Mark II to change all kinds of settings, whereas on the ZV-1 you can only use it for touch tracking, etc. So it's much nicer functions on the ZV-1F and ZV-1 Mark II when it comes to touch operation of the camera. The ZV-1F also doesn't have RAW support when it comes to photos. They all take really nice photos, but the ZV-1F doesn't have the RAW support, whereas the ZV-1 and ZV-1 Mark II have RAW photos. And it's kind of similar when it comes to the ISO performance. The ISO on ZV-1F only goes up to 6400, whereas on the ZV-1 and ZV-1 Mark II goes up to 12800. So a little bit of a difference here, but I wouldn't recommend going as high anyway. The ZV-1 also doesn't have the built-in ND filter. The ZV-1 and ZV-1 Mark II do. So that's a big plus over here for me. But on the ZV-1F you can screw on the filter onto the lens because you have the thread on it, and the ZV-1 and ZV-1 Mark II don't have that thread, but then we have that built-in ND, so we can use the ND on all of them. Just on the ZV-1F we're gonna have to buy a separate ND. We don't have it built in. All of those cameras also have a free capsule mic that we can use for recording the audio, but on the ZV-1 Mark II also get the extra function of being able to set the direction of the recording when it comes to this mic, so we can record from the front, from the back, back and front, or auto. So this is like an intelligent option on the ZV-1 Mark II, which is going to be able to help us record better audio on the camera. But they all have the same sort of system when it comes to the audio, and they all come with the wind muff for those microphones. However, the ZV-1F doesn't have the multi-interface hot shoe. The ZV-1 and ZV-1 Mark II do have that, so we can actually use the microphones from Sony with the Mi interface on those cameras, but only using the analog signal, so they don't have the digital signal, they only have analog, and the ZV-1F doesn't have that at all. The ZV-1 Mark II also adds the Cine Vlog mode, where we can add the black bars on top and bottom of the frame, and we can change all the colors to make our footage more cinematic in camera. I'm not a huge fan of that, but I guess for the beginning user it might be something nice to play with and experiment with without going too deep into the post-production when it comes to making our footage cinematic or more cinematic. And last small but kind of big when it comes to usage of the camera change is the ZV-1 had the tripod mount really close to the camera doors. So if you mount a tripod plate or a grip you've been using with your camera, you had to remove it to change the battery on the camera. But with the ZV-1F and ZV-1 Mark II, they changed it, they improved it, and they moved it to the other side of the camera. So now you can use your tripod or tripod plate and change the battery easily. So that's a huge bonus when it comes to usability of the camera. And this is pretty much everything that I had sum up when it comes to the differences and similarities of these cameras. And in my opinion, there's two biggest factors when it comes to choosing one of those cameras. It's the lens you're gonna want the most. So if you want to vlog from the hand, my opinion is the ZV-1 Mark II is going to be the best, because you're going to be having the widest frame over there. The next one will be the 20mm on the ZV-1F. That's going to be very good for vlogging as well. and the least expensive. So if you just want a camera that you're gonna point at yourself and record yourself, this camera is gonna be the perfect one, the ZV-1F. The ZV-1 Mark II is gonna be good for pointing at yourself and recording yourself, but also recording some of the B-roll or zooming in on some things. When the ZV-1, in my opinion, is gonna be the worst for vlogging, for pointing it at yourself, but in my opinion, it's a good photo camera because you have bigger reach and you have that 2.8 lens, 1.8 to 2.8 lens, so you can get a really nice photos with this camera. But I think those cameras are mainly targeted at people recording vlogs. So in my opinion, from these three cameras, the best choice is the ZV-1 Mark II. The second choice I'd say is the ZV-1F, and the third choice would be the ZV-1 because that's the oldest camera and I think that this lens wasn't really made for vlogging. But let me know in the comments what you think about these cameras, if you've been using one of them or you prefer one of them over the other. And if you like this video, please leave it a like, subscribe to my channel and ring the bell so you don't miss any future videos similar to this one. And I would also love if you followed me on Instagram, where I try to post daily and you can find out what's up with me and what I'm currently working on. This is everything for this video. Thanks for watching and I will see you in the next one. Bye.